In mission together we all join our hands. In mission together throughout many lands. With our hearts united, our voices we raise. To God our Creator in glorious praise.
Hello, friends. This is Reflections, a religious affairs program sponsored by Paducah Cooperative Ministry, where together we do God's work with human hands. I'm Karen Winkel. I pastor United Church of Paducah. I'm one of your co-hosts, and your other co-host is Gregory Waldrop, who pastors Fountain Avenue United Methodist. It's good to be together, Gregory.
Glad to be right here with you and to be with you all as well. We're glad you're here. Today we have another spotlight on one of the ministers in our community, a longtime Paducah Cooperative Ministry supporter. We have with us the Reverend Dr. Rick Dye, who is the superintendent of the Paducah District of the United Methodist Church. Welcome, Rick. We're very glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here this morning.
Many of you, the audience may know Rick as pastor at Lone Oak for 10 years.
11.
11 years. Had worked in the Wesley Foundation down at the campus ministry down at UT Martin, and also a long time in Marshall County as well. How
Yes.
long were you in Marshall County?
I was in Marshall County 13 years.
Total years. So we glad you're staying around and now providing substantial leadership. Tell us a little bit about your job, your position. Everybody may not know the sort of the organization of the Methodist Church, and you're a great position person to tell us about that.
Well, the Methodist Church is divided into conferences, and in each conference you have a number of districts, and in our Memphis conference we have 7 districts, and I'm the district superintendent of the Paducah District, which is the northern part of the Jackson Purchase area, the 6 counties. There's a little bit in Callaway and one of the other counties that I don't have. But I have 6 counties, 61 churches in just those 6 counties, and 40-some ministers that I try to oversee and give supervision not only to them and their spiritual welfare and what they're going through in leadership issues, but then also try to look at the welfare of the church and the issues that they're facing, which is becoming more and more of a challenge with the demographics that are in place. And then also I guess the ultimate job that I have is working with the cabinet and the bishop to make assignments each year as we move ministers from time to time from one appointment to the other. So it's a very time-consuming kind of position. I made the comment that when I was first named to this position that God must have had a sense of humor, because I despise meetings, and that's what I do most of my day is have meetings.
And I would think also you spend a fair amount of time behind the wheel.
Yes, absolutely. Probably as much as 3,000 miles a month, just driving on business.
So a week for you might be, what, 70 hours?
Oh, it just
80
depends on the week.
hours? Yeah.
You know, because there are meetings that can only be held at night, Sunday activities. It's a very full life.
How do you sustain yourself in that? I mean, I'm just, I'm thinking about what it's like to be, the pastor to a single congregation where I go to the same spot or I'm in the same, maybe 8-mile radius every day. How do you sustain yourself in that?
Well, I think there are three points that I try to keep in mind. First is perspective. I can't do it all, and I can't solve everyone's problems, and I didn't cause everyone's problems. So all I can do is help mediate, help try to understand and bring clarity to a situation, and then hopefully the parties and the individuals involved can reach some conclusions about the actions that they need to take. So I really try to maintain perspective about what I can do and what I can't do, so that I don't get overwhelmed in that area. Another thing is a little bit of physical exercise, walking or working out, doing something that is completely different from your job. Because if you sit at your desk all day long and come home and eat supper and then sit at your desk all evening, you're going to have some burnout that will eventually catch up with you. So I try to do some walking, some exercise, to do things a bit different. I like to travel, and so I like to plan a major trip each year. So I'm excited about that because it gives me something to look forward to that's not necessarily connected with work, but may have some overlap. And then the third area, which probably in some ways may be the most important, is to try to keep a sense of humor. You know, if you can laugh at yourself and laugh at the world, and one thing that helps me is British comedies. So I'm a big fan of Monty Python and some of the other comedies that are on TV and continual rerun as they are. That gives me an escape that I need to help me focus and to equalize myself.
You're sort of the point person on the Methodist notion of accountability, that we all are best served and we live our lives best in accountable relationships. We operate out of that in the church, in the local church with lay people and clergy together. But your job is to hold both churches, at least in part, churches and clergy accountable to the things that we have, the disciplines that we've determined nourish us and are important for this season in this place. Talk about that a little bit, if you will.
Well, I think one of the first things you have to do is define accountability. It's not an inquisition. It's not coming in and judging people. It's not saying you failed and so goodbye. Accountability is really encouragement to each other, to help us to understand that there are better ways in which we can do things. For example, when we have ministers' meetings, I try to avoid all the junk snacks and donuts that are so prevalent at a lot of meetings, and try to encourage the ministers to eat a healthier snack when they come to a meeting. I also believe strongly in the basics, that until we get the basics down, we're not going to be able to go farther into our Christian walk and our discipleship. And for me, the basics is an awareness of God in our lives that guides us. But it's also doing the things that need to be done in a basic way. You know, they say that 80% of work is just showing up. You know, just showing up. So I try to encourage preachers to be faithful to their call and their commitment, that it's not a 1 hour a week job the way some people, think. And we need to encourage our ministers to realize their responsibilities and their duties, and that if they cover the basics by having a devotional life, a prayer life, study of the scriptures, involvement in covenant discipleship group of some sort, or some spiritual friendship that guides them and leads them. I have a spiritual friend that if I didn't have, I just don't know that I could have survived. They have been my rock in many, many ways throughout all of these past 3 years. Those basics, I think, have to be covered before we can get on to the richer and perhaps meatier parts of our Christian discipleship. And I think that that's sometimes where we want to jump that. We want to go from commitment to saint. Well, in between commitment and saint, there's an awful lot of work and sweat and toil and effort to try to understand our walk and what we're really trying to accomplish in our lives. It's not just about getting to heaven. It's about making the kingdom of God come on earth. And that's a whole different picture.
Yeah.
So.
One of the things that I'm appreciating in what you're saying, Rick, is the spiritual heart that you bring to this. One of the criticisms that I had as a lay person, and maybe even now as a clergy person, is that it seems to me that sometimes as people move into leadership that takes them out of the church, that their faith suffers. they really become kind of administrators and take on kind of a secular approach. And so as you're speaking, I'm just really excited by that and feeling a little bit envious of the folks that you're working with, because that's a wonderful example, a wonderful model that you're offering.
Well, and I don't want to downplay the administrative side of it. I mean, that's probably where I'm the strongest in my gifts and graces. I do want to be a good administrator, and I do have expectations that, the churches and the pastors will be able to conduct a good meeting, start on time, finish on time, do the things that are necessary. And of course, in the Methodist Church, in our connectional system, it's a pay the apportionments pressure that we put on churches. And to me, if the basics are covered, then that shouldn't be as big of an issue as it sometimes is, because we just see those things as normal. When I get up every morning, I have a routine, and I go through that routine before I go out the door. And if I don't, then when I go out the door, something's wrong. And many times I have to go back. Well, I think it's the same way in the church. There are certain structural things that we have to do. There are certain obligations that we have if we're going to be who we say we are. And if we're going to be who we say we are, then we need to do those things. But once we've done them, we can move on. We can develop and grow in the ways God would want us to. So,
I know, just having served in Marshall County with you, I know a little bit of your background, but part of what we'd love for you to share is sort of how you arrived as minister and all the components of your call that.
Well, the brief story would be that I was born and raised in the Ozark Mountains near Ava, Missouri. So I'm a country person, and that was one of the things that I had to learn to accept. And I was raised in a very loving church. I've said that God called me, but the church loved me into the ministry. It was a very caring, compassionate congregation, and I had the pastor that I grew up under was there for 34 years. So he had a tremendous influence on me. That was in the Church of the Nazarene. In fact, I became an elder in the Church of the Nazarene and pastored for 10 years as an elder before becoming a United Methodist. Now, Nazarenes and United Methodist are both Wesleyan. In fact, the Nazarene Church came out of the Methodist Church in 1905. So it really was not a struggle at all for me. It was just like I was going to a larger field of service, and I really appreciated the strong emphasis that the Methodist Church placed on education. So because of that, I was able to finish my degree at Murray State, and then I went to Vanderbilt Divinity School for my master's degree. And then while serving as a campus minister at UT Martin, I completed my doctorate at Asbury Theological. So that educational component has been very important to me. And I've had longer pastorates in my life. The 13 years that I spent in Marshall County was really divided between two pastorates. Then at Lone Oak for 11 years, and UT Martin campus minister for 8 years, and now I'm in my third year of being a district superintendent. And hopefully that'll only last 6 years because I really miss the local church. I think that's where ministry takes place. I'm glad to do what I can do as an administrator, but I can only do so much. I think the action takes place locally.
And talk about some of that action in terms of the district that you're serving. What kinds of things are you seeing happen?
Just the recent ice storm, we set up a 800 number at Broadway, and I think at last count we've had over 600 requests for people to come and clean up yards and to help people make adjustments after the ice storms. We've got relief teams that are working every day in the area. Tomorrow I'm going to Mayfield, where there'll be a team coming from the Tennessee area to come up and spend 2 or 3 days in the Mayfield area cleaning. So the Methodist Church emphasizes helping neighbor, being connected, and that relief effort has been going on. Reedland United Methodist Church set up a food kitchen and fed the workers and the people that were without power for about 3 weeks at the very beginning of the ice storm. The church has always been responsive to human need, and that's an exciting part about it. As I go from church to church, I can go to perhaps one of the smallest churches in my district and learn that they've raised $8,000 for Relay for Life. And you know, that's not a church apportionment. That's a community effort to make the community a better place. And so I get excited about those kinds of things.
Karen has mentioned in times past that all the various ways the church is changing and emerging around the world. Really, you're a person who appreciates the worldwide perspective. Tell us a little bit about where you sense and see the church moving and growing and taking shape.
Well, I think the church is struggling right now with its identity because I've learned in this job that as church people, we love our buildings when we hold on to those memories. It's recently been said that if you want a picture of what's going on in the church, if you look at the membership, that's a picture of the past. If you look at the attendance, that's a picture of the present. If you look at the baptisms and the conversions, that's a picture of the future. Unfortunately, we have churches that have wonderful pictures of the past, and they're struggling with the present. And we have too many churches that are not taking in any new members at all because they're resistant to change. And I always find that intriguing because as ministers, we preach about change all the time. We talk about conversion, a new life, a new heart, a new way of doing things, and yet you go to church and we've never done it that way before and we're not going to start now. And so it's that inability to adapt, I think, that's hurting the church. And because of that, I think we have opened ourselves up to individuals coming in who tell people what they want to hear in order to build the crowd. One of the things that I'm often asked by a church committee about a minister is, can they preach? Well, what does that mean, can they preach? You know, if they're really preaching the gospel, it's going to be convicting at times, it's going to be uncomfortable, but many times what they're really saying is, can he entertain me? You know, will he make me feel good? And I think we've got to struggle with that whole understanding of what the gospel is about. It's not about feeling good, it's about our commitment to God and to the world in a way that makes the world a better place. And so all of the efforts to feel good, to cater to the consumerism of the American populace. In other words, you may have heard of people who shop for church. They'll find a church that they enjoy. Well, I honestly think that sometimes the church we need may not be the church we enjoy, but it's the church that challenges us and speaks to us.
Yeah, asks the most from us. Yeah.
Yeah, and it calls us back into accountability, which was what we talked about earlier, that we need to do the basics, you know. And I have a difficult problem with seeing a God who I think is more concerned about how I feel than whether someone has food or not. You know, let's take care of the food first. Let's take care of the basics. And then all of these other things I think will take care of themselves.
So I think we're in this transition. We aren't what we were in the 50s for sure.
No.
You know, and I know many churches look back longingly and, you know, please, Pastor, you know, recreate that day.
Yeah.
Do you have, we can't see into the future. What do you have something that you sense is on the horizon because I think the Spirit's doing a new thing.
Well, I think it's going to be a death and resurrection, which again is certainly a biblical story. I think many of our churches, in their reluctance to hold on, a church is either growing, it's either maintaining itself, or it's either dying. We have a smaller percentage of churches that are actually growing. Many churches are not growing, they're simply maintaining what they have. And they'll be able to do that as long as the economics hold out and the demographics. But as we get older in this area, the population ages, that's going to become harder and harder. And so I think we're going to see a significant number of churches close. But out of that, there can come new life as people understand that what started that early church or that particular church can be the same impetus that helps them start a new movement, a new understanding as they relate to the world. The difficulty is our understanding of faith is changing. You may have noticed in the news the last 2 or 3 days that they say the people in America who no longer believe is increasing. Now it's up to 15% of the population has no belief in God. And the reason is, I think we as the established church have failed to really show how God is relevant in this day and age. We take positions from the past and we want to impose them on the present and the future, and it just does not work that way. So I think we have to be much more fluid in how we approach worship, how we approach the way in which we engage the community. We feed people. South American bishop, I forget his name, said that it's okay to feed the poor, but it's not okay to ask why they are poor. Well, I think we've got to start asking, why are we poor? Why are so many people without health insurance? Why are so many people working in low-income jobs? Why are so many people struggling when there are a very, very small percentage that are actually making money and getting richer off of the misery of others? I will never forget, one of my seminary professors said that we have a high standard of living because the rest of the world has a low standard of dying. And I think we need to face that as a reality, that we've got to get beyond the politics and beyond the boundaries and realize that this truly is a global experiment, that it's the world, and God created the world. And so we need to be involved in it.
So you're talking really about kind of revitalizing the prophetic voice of the church, I would think, about looking at those places where we're participating really in the brokenness of the world, and we're supporting the brokenness of the world. You're really kind of calling us to look at the world in terms of what is just, what is right, what
makes for wholeness.
Well, it comes back to
place.
to the example. If you're a factory owner and you have 200 people employed in your factory, and you're making a fair profit, why can't you continue to do that instead of saying, well, I could make more money by shipping these jobs to another country, or I could, and that's where the stockholders, we get involved because we own stock in that company, and greed and fear, unfortunately, are the two things that seem to operate most in our society right now, and that's not what God is about. God is not about fear, and He's not about greed.
And it hasn't worked very well even in the practical outworking of the secular culture either, has it?
No.
We've got a shambles operating out of those two fairly clearly. Yeah. Well, we're getting close to the edge of our time here, and I wondered if there's, as you look out at your work, any other particular insights that you have gleaned in these last 3 years, or really in the several years of your ministry culminating in these last 3 years in sort of an overseer's function?
Well, I think I would come back to something I said very early in our talk, and that was that the church loved me into the ministry. We're facing a crisis in the ministry now because we don't have enough young people answering a call to ministry. And I think there are a number of reasons for that. Some are the working conditions. I mean, it isn't easy, and you're not going to be in the ministry for the money. even though there are a few flashy preachers that seemingly get all the press. The average minister works very hard and is very committed and very dedicated to what they do, and I do believe in that sense of calling. But I think that calling has to come to the person through a congregation that helps them see their potential, that they can make a difference. And you don't have to be a certain height or weight or sex, or you can be whoever you are, and God can use you in the kingdom if you're open and willing to do that. And I think we need to explore that more with our young people, encourage them, and help them understand that that's a possibility for their lives.
That's important. That really is important. Anything out over the horizon you see that our viewing audience might be interested in? Any events, activities out there that are significant?
Well, nothing comes to mind right now other than our continued work at disaster relief. You know, we're still working hard to help people deal with those issues. And again, I would encourage people simply to be patient, also to keep perspective. I've heard people talk about this as being Katrina. It's not Katrina, it's just a royal mess. There's a lot of limbs and things down on the ground. We just need to pick them up, and it's going to take a little time. And I think as spring approaches, we'll have more and more teams coming into the area to do that. So I would encourage people to simply be patient.
We usually host the United Methodists from the Western Kentucky and Western Tennessee area every 5 years. We've got won't be this year, but maybe it'll be next year or the year after. Anyway, you'll know when there's a whole crowd of Methodists that overwhelm things here in Paducah, but that's soon to come as well.
Well, this has just been wonderful. Thank you. You know, you said you're from the Ozarks and kind of a country boy, but I see that God gave you a wonderful mind and a beautiful heart, and has kind of worked all those things together. I've been really inspired by what you've had to say and really who you are. So
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Rick, for coming and being with us today and sharing, and blessings as you continue to serve. You're a humble and gifted servant. Makes me wish I were a Methodist. Yeah.
That can be arranged.
Yeah, no, I'm fine where I am, but I think I've been adopted by the Methodists.
Yeah,
But anyway,
yeah. She's part
it's
of
been
the
good to
family.
have you with us today here on Reflections. So Rick Dye, District Superintendent for the Paducah District, we thank you for being here,
you.
and good to be with you.
And you. Remind everybody that you can capture these on replay on the internet, paducah2.org, the number 2, paducah2.org, and you can see this program over and over again, or you can find others that we've done. So
Very good. Well, we just would invite you to return to Reflections, and that in the coming days and weeks, months and years, that you join Paducah Cooperative Ministry in doing God's work with human hands. Shalom.
Shalom.
In mission together.